I married the right man at the wrong time. Olivia's story. My name's Olivia Hale. I'm 32 years old, and I married the right man. Just not when I was ready to love him the way he deserved. People like to say timing is everything, but nobody tells you that timing can also be cruel. That sometimes you meet the person who fits you perfectly while you're still half built yourself. 1. Before us in 2017, I was 24 and living in a one-bedroom walk-up in Brooklyn that smelled perpetually of takeout and laundry detergent. I was freelancing as a copywriter, bartending at night, and pretending instability was the same thing as freedom. Conrad Langford was 28, and everything I wasn't. Organized, reliable, calm. He worked at an architecture firm downtown and came into the cafe next to my apartment every morning at 8:05 a.m. sharp. Large cappuccino, extra foam, I'd ask. He always smiled. Only if you're making it. At first, it was nothing. Two people orbiting in routine. Then one day he stayed. I was cleaning the counter when he said, "You ever get tired of watching other people rush to jobs they hate?" I laughed. Every morning, he told me he wasn't rushing to a job he hated, just to one that was starting to blur into his life. I told him I envied people whose biggest problem was blurred edges. We ended up talking until my manager coughed from the back to remind me I was still on the clock. He left a $10 tip on a $4 coffee and said, "Dinner next time." I said yes before I thought about why. 2. The beginning. Our first date was a rainy Thursday night in Soho. He chose a tiny Italian place with brick walls and checkered tablecloths. When the waiter brought bread, Conrad poured me wine without asking what I wanted. It should have annoyed me. Instead, I felt taken care of for the first time in years. He talked about buildings the way some people talk about poems, how light changes a room, how space can make people feel safe. I told him I wrote ads about toothpaste and jealous ex-boyfriends. He said, "Someone has to make people smile about their teeth." We laughed. We kept laughing for months. 6 months later, I moved into his apartment in Williamsburg, a loft with plants that he actually remembered to water. We were that couple who split grocery lists and argued about which Netflix show to watch. He made pancakes on Sundays. I wrote freelance articles in his t-shirts. We were happy, in that quiet, ordinary way that doesn't look like a movie but feels like one when you're living it. 3. Different directions. He started talking about buying a place together, about savings, about marriage. I was still talking about backpacking in Europe and maybe going to grad school. One night he said, "You keep talking about later. When is later?" I didn't have an answer. I loved him, but I was terrified of becoming someone's plan before I had one of my own. The more he tried to anchor me, the more I drifted. Our fights weren't loud. They were tired. We would sit at the table in the dim light and talk in circles until one of us stopped mid-sentence and said, "I don't know how to fix this." One night I shouted, "I can't be what you want right now." He looked at me for a long time and said, "I don't want right now. I want you." And I cried, because I didn't know how to give him that without losing myself. 4. Leaving. When we finally split, it was almost gentle. He sat on the edge of the bed, hands pressed together like he was praying for different words to come out of his mouth. "I think we need to let each other go before we ruin what was good," he said. I packed my life into 2 suitcases. He carried them down the stairs for me. We didn't kiss goodbye. We just stood there in the hallway like people waiting for a train that wasn't coming. The door closed. The sound stayed in my ears for months. 5. The years between. People say time heals. It doesn't. It just layers life on top of the hurt, until you forget where the bruise is. I moved to Queens, rented a tiny apartment and threw myself into work. I got promoted, learned to negotiate, learned how to eat alone in restaurants without pretending to text someone. Conrad moved to Boston for a new project. I knew because I saw it on LinkedIn before I had the strength to unfollow him. We didn't speak for 3 years. Sometimes, I dreamed about him. Not about us together, but about him somewhere I couldn't reach, still ordering that same cappuccino at 8:05 a.m. I dated a photographer for a year. He was sweet, but every time he held his camera up, I felt like he was looking for something in me that wasn't there. I broke it off before I could turn him into another ghost. Work took me to Chicago, Austin, then back to New York. Every city looked different, but loneliness looked the same everywhere. 6. The call. It was March 2023, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I was standing on a rain-slick corner outside my office. "Hey," a voice said, soft but steady. I knew it instantly. "Conrad." "Yeah, it's been a while." My heart did that stupid thing where it skipped and then tried to hide it. He was in town for a conference. He asked if I wanted to catch up. I said yes. I told myself it was curiosity. It wasn't. It was gravity. 7. The cafe. We met at a small place in the East Village. New owner. Same kind of brick walls and cheap art. He looked almost exactly the same. A few lines around his eyes, a touch of gray in his hair, more grown, less guarded. He smiled when he saw me. "You cut your hair. You got older," I said. We laughed because it was safer than crying. We talked for hours. About work. About his mom who still sends Christmas cards. About the friends we used to share and lost along the way. When he asked if I was seeing anyone, I said, "Not really." He nodded, like he understood the spaces in those words. When we left, the sky had turned orange. He walked me to the subway and said, "This was good." It was too good. 8. After that, we started meeting again. Coffee on Saturdays, walks through Prospect Park, texts that turned into late-night calls. Neither of us said what we were doing. We didn't have to. We were circling something we'd already known by heart. He told me he'd been engaged once, but it didn't last. "I was there," he said, "but not really there. She deserved better." I wanted to tell him I knew that version of him. The one who shows up with his hands full of plans and his heart locked behind logic. Instead, I just said, "I get it." One evening we sat on a bench by the river. The city was glowing behind us. He said, "I don't know what this is, Liv, but it feels like coming home." And I said, "Maybe it is." 9. Learning each other again. Seeing Conrad again felt like flipping through an old book and realizing the story still made sense. The pages were worn, but the words hadn't changed. We never said we were dating. We just kept finding reasons to exist in the same spaces. A new art exhibit, a jazz bar in Brooklyn, a Sunday farmer's market, where we pretended to care about the tomatoes. He'd reach for things on the top shelf. I'd tease him for still alphabetizing his spice rack. It was easy, too easy. But the truth was, I was terrified. What if we were just nostalgia disguised as love? What if the version of me who left him was still somewhere inside, waiting to run again? One night, after dinner at a small Thai place, he asked, "Are you happy, Liv?" I stared at my plate for a long time before answering. "I'm trying to be," I said. He nodded, like he understood. "That's more than most people." 10. The storm in October. New York decided to remind us who was in charge. A storm hit. Heavy rain. Subway delays. Everything gray. My apartment building lost power for 2 days. Conrad offered to let me stay with him. His place was different now. Smaller. Quieter. Filled with books and drawings instead of plants. The first night, we drank wine by candlelight and talked like we used to, about everything and nothing. At some point, I said, "I missed this." He looked up from his glass. "This, talking to someone who actually listens." He smiled. "I missed that too." Later that night I couldn't sleep. I got up to get water, and found him sketching by the window. He said, "Still can't stop drawing when it rains." I said, "Still can't stop overthinking." We laughed softly, and something broke open in the quiet. Not pain, this time, just understanding. 11. The confession. When the storm cleared, I packed my bag to go home. He offered to drive me. In the car, everything felt heavier than it should have. At a red light he said, "Do you ever wish we'd tried harder back then?" I took a breath. "Sometimes, but I think we would have broken worse if we'd stayed." He nodded, gripping the steering wheel. "I wasn't ready either," he said. "I thought I was, but I was just scared to be alone." I looked at him. Older, steadier, softer. We both had to learn who we were without each other. We stopped outside my building. Neither of us moved. Finally he said, "You think timing gets a second chance?" "Only if we make one," I said. 12. Us. Slowly. After that we didn't rush. We met once a week, then twice, then it was every day. But it didn't feel like falling. It felt like arriving. We learned new versions of old habits. He still loved his routines. I still loved disrupting them. But now we listened, adjusted, grew. He'd make me breakfast before I left for work. I'd leave notes on his fridge. Once, while walking through Central Park, he reached for my hand. It was such a small gesture, but it felt like forgiveness made real. 13. The trip. That December, he asked me to go with him to Boston for a week. His firm was finishing a big project, and he wanted me there for the final presentation. The night before the meeting, we walked along the Charles River. The city lights shimmered on the water like scattered coins. He said, "You know, I used to picture this, you here with me. I just didn't think it would take 6 years." I smiled. Maybe the view's better now. He slipped his arm around me, and for once, I didn't think about what came next. 14. The almost goodbye. Back in New York, everything was good, until it wasn't. Work sent me an offer, a year-long project in London. It was a dream, creative freedom, international clients, real growth. When I told Conrad, he tried to smile. "That's amazing, Liv." "You don't sound amazed." "I am, just surprised." We sat in silence for a while before he said, "Are you going to take it?" "I don't know yet." "Don't stay for me," he said quietly. "We've done that mistake before." That night I couldn't sleep. The irony wasn't lost on me. The first time I left him, it was because I was scared of being trapped. Now, I was scared of losing what I'd finally found. 15. The letter. A week later, before I left for work, I found an envelope on the kitchen table. It wasn't dramatic, just a folded piece of paper, with my name written in his handwriting. "Liv, I don't want to be another thing you give up to prove something. If London is where you need to go, go. If I've learned anything, it's that love doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means waiting without resentment." Geeks. I cried harder than I did the first time we broke up, because this time, it wasn't an ending. It was permission. 16. London I went. The year in London was everything it needed to be. I worked hard, traveled, found parts of myself that had been buried under fear and routine. Conrad and I texted sometimes, short, simple messages. He'd send a photo of a new building he loved. I'd send one of a cafe with terrible coffee but great sunlight. We didn't say "I miss you." We didn't need to. 17. Coming back. When my contract ended, I came home to New York in the spring of 2025. The city looked the same, impatient, alive. I wasn't sure if I should call him. I wasn't sure if he'd want me to. 3 days after I landed, I got a message, still 8:05 a.m., for coffee. I laughed through tears. When I walked into the cafe, he was already there. Same table, same order. He looked up, smiled, and said, "You're late." I sat down, heart racing, and said, "Traffic." We didn't talk about London or the year apart. We didn't need to. It was all there, in the way his hand brushed mine when he passed the sugar, in the quiet peace that filled the space between words. 18. The proposal. A few months later, he took me to the same Italian restaurant where we had our first date 8 years ago. We ordered the same wine, the same pizza, even laughed about the checkered tablecloths. When dessert came, he pushed a small velvet box across the table. He said, "We keep finding our way back." I don't know what that means to anyone else, but to me, it means we're finally on time. I opened the box. The ring wasn't flashy, just simple gold, a single stone, quiet and honest. I didn't cry this time. I just smiled and said, "Yes." 19. Now, it's summer 2025. We live in a sunlit apartment in Queens, smaller than before but warmer. Lived in. He still sketches at the window. I still overthink things, but now, we do it together. We've learned that love isn't a race to forever, it's a rhythm you grow into, a pace that fits your steps. Sometimes, in the mornings, when he's making coffee, I catch him looking at me the way he used to, quiet, steady, sure, and I realize the timing wasn't wrong back then. We just needed time to learn how to love without fear. My name's Olivia. I married the right man, just at the wrong time. But love, when it's real, finds its own clock, and when it finally strikes, it feels like peace.